My name is Talia. I am 17 years old. I live in Australia, in a nice home, with a nice family and nice things. By my standards, I am just an average girl, but I know that by the standards of the majority of my fellow human beings, I am privileged beyond comprehension. I live in a world of social media. I can access almost any piece of information I want within a matter of minutes. I can share my opinion with the click of a button. I can contact people around the globe instantly. Social media does not have borders. It does not have nations. I could telephone a person living in India and have a conversation with them just as easily as I could have a conversation with my neighbour. This connects us in a much more personal way than we ever could have done in the past. Imagine what your life would be like if you lived on less than $2.50 a day. You've probably heard the statistics before, and it's easy to imagine, in that disconnected way, what it would be like for some poor Indian girl living in the slums of Mumbai. But imagine what it would be like for you, where you are, right now, if tomorrow you had to start living on less than $2.50 a day. You wouldn't be able to afford electricity, much less pay the rent or mortgage on your home. You couldn't pay for your daily morning coffee, textbooks for school, petrol, car registration, or even public transport fares, a mobile phone or internet access, or any new clothes. If you were sick, there would be no medical supplies, and you would be forced to work anywhere you could, probably in harsh conditions, just to provide a meagre amount of food once a day, not only for you, but also for the rest of your family. 50% of humanity lives on less than $2.50 a day. I'm not okay with this. So I set out on a search to find a new way of tackling the issue of global poverty. I listened to speeches by famous people that all spouted the same facts and figures and gave me no real solutions. I researched sponsorship and donor agencies and tried to figure out what they were actually achieving. As I delved deeper and deeper into my research, I began to catch glimpses of this idea that at first seemed harsh and just plain insensitive. But as I looked at it further, it began to make some kind of shocking sense. Maybe aid isn't the answer. Maybe giving food and money and resources to the poorest of the poor is actually wrong. Let me outline a few examples of why this is the case. Firstly, food aid. More than 50% of people in developing countries are employed in the agricultural industry. When rich developed nations dump food onto poor developing countries, they actually push people in the agricultural industry out of jobs because they cannot hope to compete with the aid food that is free, cheap, or heavily subsidized. Of course, there is the exception for the case of emergency relief. For example, food aid received in Indonesia after the 2004 tsunami saved thousands of lives. But this type of aid only accounts for around 7% of today's aid program. Which brings me to suggestion number 1. Stop giving aid in the form of food. Okay, so if food aid isn't the answer, what about resources? Nope, wrong again. Oxfam International is famous for coming up with many new ideas to combat poverty in developing countries. Their most famous idea is probably the goat, but you can buy all sorts of things that are given to people living in poverty. Chickens, beehives, maize mills, cartloads of manure, water pumps, buildings, and the list goes on. However, while these may seem like great ideas, there are often faults in how they are implemented. Maize mills, which are an important labour-saving device, lay in disrepair because the local people don't know how to fix them, or they run out of fuel, which is too expensive to buy. The same happens to water pumps. Livestock such as goats, cows, and chickens contract diseases and die because their owners don't have the knowledge or the money to treat them properly and get them vaccinated. Buildings are erected with the purpose of being schools, but nobody considers the cost to hire teachers to fill them, not for months but for years, and schools stand empty. Suggestion number 2. Stop giving aid in the form of resources. Right, so no food and no resources. What about money? Did you know for every $1 given in aid to a developing country, $25 is spent on debt repayment? In Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, it has been reported that women can be charged up to 10% interest daily by local moneylenders so they can run their own businesses. In other areas, it is even higher. This proves that women want to run their own businesses, become self-sufficient and not reliant on aid. However, they can't do this on the higher interest rates charged in the marketplace, and the donor community is failing at providing them with loans. Often, when money is given in the form of aid, it comes with strings attached. The donors decide how the money is spent, or the government, with little consultation with the people it is actually supposed to help. In this sense, monetary aid often has the same downfalls as resource aid. If a project does not make a profit, it can only work for as long as the donors keep supporting it, which creates a dependency on foreign aid. Aside from this, there is the problem of corruption, of aid being hijacked and used to finance wars or buy drugs. So, suggestion number 3, stop giving aid in the form of money. Which brings me to the question on everybody's lips. If aid isn't working, how can we help? There are various ways in which we can provide real help to those living in extreme poverty. Poverty is being overcome, and it's not being beaten by aid, but by economic growth. As we watch some of the world's poorest countries grow of their own accord, we can see more clearly that aid in any form, capital, technology, roads, schools, armies of technical advisors, does not make much difference. The answer is to foster economic growth in developing countries, and there are 3 key ways the United Nations can go about doing this. Solution number 1, provide microfinance institutions to poor women. Women work 2/3 of the world's working hours, produce half of the world's food, but earn only 10% of the world's income and own less than 1% of the world's property. Many women in the developing world do not have access to banking facilities, and many more can only open an account with their husband's permission. Yet it is proven that when women have access to money, they are more likely than men to spend it on their families. As Jacqueline Novogratz said of one UNICEF-funded project, if the women had been given the chance to borrow for a project they believed would generate income, they would have focused more seriously on the work. A market mechanism would have provided a better feedback loop for both women and donors. Instead, the system festered under low expectations and mediocre results. Microfinance systems are instrumental in lifting poor women out of poverty. They work by lending a small amount of money, often less than $10, to a group of women who are free to use it on whatever they wish. When all the women have repaid the loan, they can apply for a larger one. By this process, the women can lift themselves out of poverty, while also creating a credit history that has standing with real banks. One example of a microfinance system is the Grameen Bank of Bangladesh, which was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. Founded by Muhammad Yunus, it was the first bank of its kind and has inspired hundreds of similar banking facilities in developing countries around the world. Since its inception in 1976, the bank has distributed $11.35 billion in loans, out of which $10.11 billion has been repaid. Solution number 2, strengthen the economy of developing countries through investment. Jacqueline Novogratz is the founder of Acumen Fund, an organisation that invests in entrepreneurs in developing countries that have the ability to make a large-scale difference to the economy. Some of the projects the Acumen Fund has provided loans to include setting up a new telemedicine system in India so that doctors can more easily diagnose and treat people in remote areas by means of computers with video capabilities, distributing and promoting new, long-lasting insecticide-treated bed nets in Africa to help combat the spread of malaria, and the company Drishti, which sets up telekiosks in India, providing people with work and allowing locals in remote areas to pay a small fee in return for photos, phone calls, and computer training classes. In her book The Blue Sweater, Jacqueline Novogratz says of Acumen Fund, "We plan to work alongside our entrepreneurs, offering management advice and technical help and connections to a wider network of talent. We were also willing to be realistic about how and when loans would be repaid, remembering these businesses at the bottom of the pyramid could take a long time to grow, and that our primary goal was not to make money but to effect long-lasting change." Investment like this, rather than charity, is key to change in the developing world. Solution number 3. Inform donors of the limitations of traditional aid. Too often do I see advertisements claiming that you can help end world poverty just by donating a few dollars. If the answer were that simple, it would have been done years ago. The issue of solving world poverty is not simple, but neither is it hopeless. Indeed, the rich West as a whole is in deep denial about the way the world is changing as wealth and power flows away from us to the developing world. And I wonder whether this is not, deep down, why we are all suddenly scrambling to give more aid. Any act of charity is, among other things, an assertion of power. Perhaps as power slips away, we feel more need to assert it. The United Nations needs to make it clear to people that there are other ways in which we can help the developing world come out of extreme poverty. With the development of social media, we have all become global citizens, and we must all work together as equals if we want to see the world become a better place for everybody.